She grabbed an 8-year-old boy by the hair and yanked his head back so hard, his neck snapped sideways. Then she leaned in close and spat on him. A flight attendant, in uniform, in front of a full cabin of passengers. The boy had spilled orange juice during turbulence. That was his crime. He was black, he was alone, and he whispered, "I'm sorry, ma'am," while her fist was still in his hair. Nobody moved, nobody said a word. But 10 minutes after that plane touched down, her 22-year career was ripped away from her, and she never set foot on an aircraft again. If this story hits you the way it hit me, subscribe to this channel right now. Stay with Ethan's story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this one reaches. Denise Brooks knelt down at the gate in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and grabbed her son's face with both hands. "Look at me, baby." Ethan looked at her. 8 years old. Small for his age, quiet in a way that made teachers love him and other kids forget he was there. "You're going to see your daddy. You're going to have the best week of your whole summer, and I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mama." "What do you say if you need help?" "Excuse me, can you help me, please?" "That's my boy." She kissed his forehead. She pulled his jacket zipper up, even though it wasn't cold. She checked his pocket for the 3rd time to make sure the card with her phone number was still there. She had already called the airline 4 times that week. She had spoken to a woman named Teresa, who swore someone would walk Ethan to his seat and check on him every 30 minutes. Denise had done everything right. Every single thing a mother could do. She stood up and watched the gate attendant take Ethan's hand. She watched them walk down the jetway. Ethan turned back once and waved. She waved back with a smile so wide it hurt, because she didn't want him to see that she was falling apart. The moment he disappeared around the corner, Denise pressed her hand against the window and whispered, "Lord, bring my baby back to me safe." Ethan found his seat, 22A, window. He buckled his seatbelt by himself. He put his backpack under the seat and sat perfectly still, with his hands in his lap, like he was in church. The woman next to him, an older lady with reading glasses, looked over and smiled. "First flight, sweetheart?" He nodded. "Oh, you're going to love it. Wait till you see the clouds from up here." He didn't love it. The takeoff pressed him back in his seat, and his ears popped so hard he thought something was broken. He gripped the armrest and held his breath and counted to 10 the way his mother told him to do when he was scared. When the plane leveled out, he looked out the window. Clouds below him. Actual clouds, white and thick, like a floor made of cotton. He pressed his face against the glass and forgot, just for a second, to be afraid. That was the last good moment Ethan Brooks would have for a very long time. 45 minutes into the flight, the beverage cart came down the aisle. The woman pushing it was Melissa Grant, 51, senior flight attendant, 22 years on the job. She had a way of moving through a cabin that made people pull their elbows in. Before the flight, when the gate crew radioed that there was an unaccompanied minor in 22A, Melissa had turned to her colleague, Javi Reyes, and rolled her eyes. Wonderful. Babysitting. Javi was 26, 14 months on the job. He had already learned the rules. Don't challenge Melissa. Don't correct Melissa. Don't give Melissa a reason to remember your name. He said nothing. When the cart reached row 22, Melissa didn't look at Ethan. Not really. She looked through him. "What do you want?" Ethan's mouth opened, but nothing came out right away. He was looking at the cart, trying to read the labels. "Today, please. I've got 40 rows behind you." "Orange juice, please, ma'am." She poured it, set the cup on his tray table. No napkin. Moved on. Ethan wrapped both hands around the cup. He took a sip. Cold and sweet. He took another sip and thought about his dad and the sign his dad always held at airports, big and silly with too much glitter. Then the turbulence hit. It came like a punch. The plane dropped, lurched sideways, and shook so hard the overhead bins rattled. A woman screamed somewhere up front. The seatbelt sign flashed on with a hard ding. Ethan's cup went off the tray table. Orange juice splashed across his shirt, the armrest, the edge of the aisle carpet. Half a cup, maybe less. The kind of spill that happens 100 times a day on every flight in the sky. But not to Melissa Grant. Not today. Ethan froze. He stared down at the mess, and his first thought, his only thought, was that he had done something wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just sorry, the way kids are sorry when they've been taught that any mistake could be the one that brings trouble. The woman next to him reached over. "Oh, honey, it's fine. That happens to everybody." Footsteps, hard and fast, coming down the aisle. Melissa stopped at row 22 and stared at the spill like it was a personal insult. "Are you kidding me right now?" Ethan looked up at her. His lips moved, but nothing came out. "Do you know how long this takes to clean? Do you have any idea what kind of mess this is?" "He didn't do anything," the woman in 22B said. "The plane shook. It was the turbulence." Melissa didn't even glance at her. She leaned down into Ethan's space, and her hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of his hair at the top of his head. She yanked hard. His neck snapped back and his face tilted up toward hers, and his eyes went so wide you could see white all the way around. "You are trouble," she said. Her voice was low and mean and steady. "This is exactly what happens when they let kids like you fly alone." Kids like you. The cabin heard it. Every single person within 5 rows heard those 3 words, and every single one of them understood exactly what she meant. Ethan's hands flew up to her wrist, small fingers pulling at a grown woman's grip. He couldn't break free. He didn't try hard. He just held on like he was bracing for whatever came next. Then Melissa turned her head and spat. The saliva hit his cheek just below his eye near the corner of his mouth. She spat on a child. The cabin went silent. Not peaceful silent, shocked silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the engines humming and the air system blowing and nothing else, because every human voice has been sucked out of the room. Ethan stopped struggling. His body went limp in his seat. He looked at Melissa with his hair still in her fist and the spit still on his face, and he said 5 words that would break the heart of every person who heard them on video in the days that followed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry." Row 14, seat C. Rachel Monroe had her laptop open and a legal brief on the screen when the turbulence hit. She grabbed her coffee, held it steady, and didn't think twice about it. She was a civil rights attorney from Chicago, 34 years old. She had a deposition on Monday and a hearing on Wednesday, and she was using this flight to prepare. Then she heard it. Not the spill, not the turbulence. She heard a grown woman's voice ripping into someone. And then she heard a child say sorry, and something in her chest turned to iron. She craned her neck. She saw Melissa's hand in Ethan's hair. She saw the boy's face. She saw enough. Rachel unbuckled her seatbelt. She closed her laptop. She stood up. She walked down that aisle, and her heels hit the floor with the kind of rhythm that makes people look up. "Let go of him." Melissa's head turned. Her hand was still in the boy's hair. "Excuse me?" "I said let go of that child. Right now. Take your hand off his head." The cabin woke up. Passengers twisted in their seats, phones lifted, red recording dots blinked on. Melissa released Ethan's hair. She didn't step back. She straightened up and looked at Rachel with 22 years of seniority in her eyes. "Ma'am, return to your seat. This is a cabin crew matter." "A cabin crew matter? You just grabbed an 8-year-old by the hair and spat on him. I saw it. Everyone on this plane saw it." He was being disruptive. He's been a problem since boarding. He spilled juice during turbulence. That is not disruption. That is gravity. Somebody in row 18 let out a breath that was almost a laugh. The tension in the cabin shifted. Melissa felt it, and her jaw tightened. "If you do not return to your seat immediately, I will have security waiting for you when we land." Rachel didn't move, not 1 inch. "Good, because I'll be filing a formal complaint. And judging by the 15 phones recording you right now, I won't be the only one." Melissa's eyes moved, left, right. She saw the phones. She saw the faces. Angry faces. Recording faces. Witness faces. For the first time, something behind her expression flickered. Not guilt, fear. She took a half step back. I was maintaining safety and order on this aircraft. You were assaulting a minor, and I'm an attorney, so I'd suggest you stop talking. Melissa's mouth opened. Then it closed. She turned and walked toward the forward galley without another word. Rachel knelt down next to Ethan. The boy was sitting rigid in his seat, his hands flat on his thighs, his chest barely moving. There was still moisture on his cheek. "Hey," Rachel said. Her voice was completely different now. Soft, steady, like talking to a bird that might fly. "My name is Rachel. You're safe. Can I sit with you?" He looked at her for a long time. He was searching her face for something, maybe for danger, maybe for permission. Then he nodded. Rachel turned to the woman in 22B. "Would you mind if I took your seat?" "Please," the woman was already standing. "Please sit with him." Rachel sat down. She didn't touch Ethan. She didn't wipe his face. She didn't hug him or crowd him. She just sat beside him and said, "You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan. Not one single thing." His lower lip shook. His chin crumpled. But he held on. He kept holding on. In the forward galley, Melissa pulled the curtain shut and turned on Javi. "That woman is going to be a problem. I need you to back me up." Javi stared at her. His hands were at his sides. His heart was hammering. "Melissa," he spilled his juice. "That's all that happened." "He threw it. He's been acting out the entire flight." "He didn't throw it. The plane shook. I was watching." Melissa's eyes went narrow and hard. "Are you going to be a problem too, Javi? Because I can make sure you're on cargo review for the rest of the year." Javi had student loans. Javi needed this job. Javi knew what Melissa had done to the last junior attendant who crossed her. Written up twice, transferred to red-eye routes. Gone within 6 months. But Javi also had a nephew named Marco, 7 years old, big brown eyes, the same age as the boy in 22A. "I'm going to write what I saw," Javi said. "I'm going to write exactly what happened." Melissa stared at him. She didn't speak. She turned her back to him and poured a glass of water and drank it standing up alone behind a curtain. Javi stepped into the rear galley. He pulled out his phone. He opened the airline's incident reporting app. His finger hovered over the screen for almost 10 seconds. Then he began to type. Back in the cabin, Dorothy Chen was sitting in row 26 with tears running down her face. She was 67 years old, retired school teacher, 31 years in the classroom. She had heard Melissa's voice tearing into that child, and she had watched the videos being passed phone to phone down the rows. She had seen children hurt before. She had spent 3 decades watching for it, catching it, reporting it, fighting it. She thought she was past the point where it could still shatter her. She wasn't. Dorothy reached into her bag, pulled out a packet of tissues, and walked up the aisle to row 22. She handed them to Rachel. "For the little one," she said. Rachel took them. "Thank you." Dorothy looked down at Ethan. She bent slightly and said, "You are a brave young man. Don't you let anyone tell you different." Ethan looked up at her, and his expression changed. Not a smile, something quieter, like he was realizing, maybe for the first time that day, that the world had people in it who would not hurt him. Dorothy went back to her seat. She pulled out her phone. She had never posted anything on social media. She didn't even have an account. But her daughter worked in local news in Sacramento, and Dorothy was about to make the most important phone call of her retirement. In seat 9B, a man named Gerald Patterson sat with his arms folded tight across his chest. 63 years old, church deacon from Marietta, Georgia. He had heard everything. He had seen Melissa's hand in that boy's hair, and he had not moved. Gerald had marched as a young man. He had stood in front of courthouses and linked arms with strangers and been called names that still echoed in his chest 40 years later. He had promised himself, swore on his mother's grave, that he would never sit still while someone brutalized a black child. And he had sat still. For 30 seconds, maybe less. 30 seconds that were going to haunt him for years. He reached into the seat pocket. He pulled out a napkin. He took out a pen and wrote in careful block letters, "I am sorry I didn't stand sooner, but I will stand for you now." He folded the napkin and put it in his breast pocket. When this flight landed, he was going to find that boy's father and put it in his hand. At 3:47 Pacific time, the captain announced descent into Los Angeles. Rachel leaned toward Ethan. "Your dad is going to be right there when we walk off this plane, okay?" "Okay." "Some people might ask you questions. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to." Ethan looked at her. "Am I in trouble?" Rachel felt something crack behind her ribs. This child, spit on, grabbed, humiliated. And he was asking if he was in trouble. "No, Ethan, you are not in trouble. Not even a little." He nodded. He didn't believe her yet. She could see it. The wheels hit the runway. The plane decelerated hard. Passengers shifted forward. The cabin was tense and humming with a strange energy. The energy of people who had witnessed something and were waiting for what came next. Then the captain came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. Airport security will be boarding the aircraft. This is not an emergency. Please stay calm." Murmurs erupted. People craned their necks. Melissa, who was standing at the forward door straightening her collar, went pale. "Security?" She turned to the other attendant near the door, a woman named Karen, a 20-year veteran who had been silent the entire flight. "What for?" Karen looked at her, long and steady. "I think you know what for, Melissa." Melissa smoothed her uniform. She touched her name tag. Her fingers were trembling. The aircraft door opened. 2 airport police officers stepped on board. Professional, calm. They nodded to the captain and addressed the cabin. "We're looking for a crew member, Melissa Grant." Every head turned to the forward galley. Melissa stepped forward, chin up, shoulders square. 22 years of authority holding her spine straight. "That's me." "Ma'am, we've received multiple reports of a physical altercation involving a minor passenger. We need you to step off the aircraft." "Multiple reports? From passengers? I was doing my job." "Ma'am, off the aircraft. Now." She stared at the officer. He stared back. 19 years of airport security in his eyes. He had seen this look before. The look of someone who still believed they could talk their way out. Melissa picked up her bag. She straightened her jacket. And she walked down the aisle of Flight 341 past every single passenger who had watched her grab a child by the hair and spit on his face. Nobody looked away. Not one person. In row 22, Ethan watched her go. He pressed himself against the window and watched the woman who had hurt him walk past, flanked by officers, and he did not understand any of it. He only knew she was leaving, and he was still sitting in the same seat, wearing the same stained shirt, feeling the same wet spot on his cheek where she had spat on him. Rachel put her hand gently on his shoulder. "It's over, Ethan. Come on, let's go find your dad." In the terminal, Marcus Brooks was running. He had received 7 text messages in 20 minutes, all from strangers, passengers who had found his number through the emergency card in Ethan's pocket. The messages came in fragments, each one worse than the last. "Your son was hurt on the plane. A flight attendant grabbed him. She spat on him. He's okay, but he's scared. Please come to the gate." Marcus had been waiting in arrivals, holding a sign he had made that morning. Blue construction paper, silver glitter letters. Ethan. He had spent 20 minutes on it because his son loved glitter and Marcus loved his son more than anything that had ever existed or would ever exist. He dropped the sign on the floor and he ran. 6'2", 210 pounds, former Army, a man who managed 300 employees and never raised his voice, a man who had learned in the military that the most powerful response to chaos was control. He reached the gate as passengers started coming through the jetway. He pushed past people. He searched every face. Then he saw him. Ethan came through holding Rachel's hand, orange juice on his shirt, backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes red and swollen, so small against the stream of adults moving around him. "Ethan!" The boy looked up. Everything he had been holding inside for the last 3 hours, every ounce of fear and shame and confusion, broke. "Daddy!" He ran. He crashed into Marcus's chest, and Marcus caught him and lifted him and held him so tight the boy's feet left the ground. Ethan buried his face in his father's neck and sobbed. Deep, shaking, gasping sobs. The crying of a child who had been brave for as long as he could and couldn't be brave for one more second. Marcus closed his eyes. He felt his son shaking. He felt the wetness of tears on his neck. He smelled orange juice and airplane recycled air and the shampoo Denise used on Ethan's hair every morning. "I've got you," Marcus said. His voice was thick but steady. "I've got you. Nobody's going to hurt you again. Daddy's right here." He held his son. And in that terminal, surrounded by strangers and police and noise, Marcus Brooks made a decision. He was not going to yell. He was not going to curse or threaten or give a single person a reason to turn this into a story about an angry black man. He was going to be calm. He was going to be precise. He was going to use every tool the law gave him, and he was going to make sure that what happened to his son on that airplane would never happen to another child as long as he had breath in his body. Rachel walked up to him. She introduced herself. She told him exactly what she had seen, clear and factual. "Mr. Brooks, I'm a civil rights attorney. If you need representation, advocacy, anything, I'm here. Pro bono." Marcus looked at her while holding Ethan against his chest. "Thank you. Thank you for standing up for my boy when nobody else did. I did what anyone should have done, but not everyone did. That's the problem." An airport officer approached. "Mr. Brooks, we'd like to get a statement whenever you're ready." Marcus nodded. He looked down at his son, who had stopped sobbing, but still had his face pressed into his father's shoulder, still had his fingers gripping Marcus's collar like he would never let go. "My son deserves dignity," Marcus said quietly. "That's not a request. That's not negotiable. My son deserves to be treated like a human being." The officer wrote it down. Across the terminal, behind a security door, Melissa Grant sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. She was talking fast. Her version of events was pouring out of her, reshaping itself in real time, smoothing edges, erasing details, building a story she could live with. "The child was out of control. I had to restrain him for safety." The airline representative across the table looked at her. He had already seen the first video. His phone had buzzed 6 times in the last 10 minutes. "Ms. Grant, I need to inform you that multiple recordings of the incident are currently circulating." Melissa stopped talking. "What do you mean, circulating?" "Online, social media, at least 4 separate videos." The color left her face. She had no idea that Dorothy Chen's daughter had already called her news desk in Sacramento. She had no idea that a hashtag was forming, spreading, multiplying across platforms, letter by letter, share by share. She had no idea that the story of what she did on Flight 341 was already moving faster than any press release or legal defense could ever hope to catch. She sat in that room and told her version to people who had already seen the truth. The clock on the wall behind her read 4:12 p.m. In less than 6 hours, her name would be known by millions. And the quiet boy from seat 22A, the one who said, "sorry," while a stranger held his hair and spat on his face, would become the reason an entire industry was forced to look in the mirror. The clock read 4:38 p.m. Pacific time when the first video hit the internet. It was uploaded by a 23-year-old college student named Tyler Briggs, who had been sitting in row 19. He had filmed 47 seconds of footage. Shaky, grainy, shot between the headrests, but it captured everything. Melissa's hand in Ethan's hair. The yank, the spit, the boy's face, the whisper. Every ugly, undeniable second of it. Tyler posted it to his social media with 6 words. "This just happened on my flight." Within 15 minutes, it had 4,000 shares. Within 30 minutes, it had 40,000. By 5:15 p.m., 3 more videos from different angles had surfaced. One from row 16, shot by a woman who had held her phone low against the seat back. One from row 23, filmed by a man who had been recording the turbulence and accidentally captured the entire confrontation. And one from row 14, the steadiest of all, taken by the passenger sitting directly behind Rachel Monroe, who had recorded every word of the exchange between Rachel and Melissa in crystal clear audio. The Internet did not need a jury. The Internet did not need a trial. The Internet had 4 camera angles, a child's voice saying sorry, and the face of a woman in uniform spitting on a boy. By 6 p.m., every major news outlet in the country had the story. Marcus Brooks did not know any of this yet. He was still at the airport. He was sitting in a family waiting room that the airline had offered, which he had accepted only because Ethan needed to sit somewhere quiet. His son was in his lap, curled up with his head against Marcus's chest, half asleep, half awake, caught in that trembling space between exhaustion and fear, where children go when their bodies give out, but their minds won't stop replaying what happened. Marcus had given his statement to airport police. He had spoken to the airline station manager, a man named David Calloway, who had arrived with sweat on his forehead and corporate language on his tongue. Mr. Brooks, I want to assure you that the airline takes this matter extremely seriously. Marcus looked at him. What's her name? I'm sorry? The flight attendant. What is her name? I'm not authorized to share employee information at this time, but I can assure you that she has been removed from service pending a full investigation. My son has spit on his face. Your employee put her hands on my child. I'm not asking you for assurances. I'm asking you for her name. David Calloway swallowed. He adjusted his tie. Her name is Melissa Grant. Marcus filed the name away. He didn't write it down. He didn't need to. That name was going to live inside him for a very long time. Rachel Monroe was still at the airport. She had given her statement separately. She had provided her contact information to 3 different officials. She had called her law firm in Chicago and spoken to her senior partner for 11 minutes. I witnessed an assault on a minor, she said, on an airplane, a flight attendant, full cabin of witnesses. It's already on video. Her partner, a man named James Whitfield, who had been practicing civil rights law for 34 years, was quiet for a moment. How bad? She grabbed him by the hair and spat on him. He's 8. Good Lord. James, I want to take this. Pro bono. This family is going to need someone, and I was there. You're a witness, Rachel. That complicates representation. I know. We'll navigate it, but I'm not walking away from this. James paused again. Okay. Start documenting everything tonight. I'll clear your Monday. Rachel hung up and walked back to the family waiting room. She knocked gently on the door. Marcus opened it. Ethan was behind him, sitting in a plastic chair with a juice box the airline had provided, untouched. Mr. Brooks, I don't want to intrude, but I want you to know that I've spoken to my firm. When you're ready, and only when you're ready, I'd like to discuss how we can make sure this goes further than an apology. Marcus studied her face. He was a man who evaluated people for a living. He hired, fired, promoted, and managed 300 employees. He could read sincerity the way other people read street signs. Sit down, he said. Rachel sat. Tell me everything you saw. From the beginning, don't leave anything out. Rachel told him. She started from the moment she heard Melissa's voice. She described the words, the grab, the spit, the boy's response, her own intervention, Melissa's reaction. Every detail laid out in the precise, organized language of a woman trained to build cases from testimony. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long time. She called him kids like you, he said. Yes. My son heard that. Yes. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked over at Ethan, who was staring at the floor, picking at the edge of his juice box. Ethan, the boy looked up. This lady helped you on the plane. Her name is Rachel. She's going to help us again. Is that okay with you? Ethan looked at Rachel. He recognized her. Something in his posture loosened, just slightly. He nodded. Okay then, Marcus said. He turned back to Rachel. What do we do first? First, we document. I need you to photograph Ethan's condition tonight. His shirt. Any marks. I need you to write down everything he tells you, word for word, as soon as possible, while it's fresh. Don't push him, but if he talks, write it down. And then we wait for the airline to make their move. They're going to come with an offer, an apology, maybe money. They're going to want this quiet. I don't want quiet, Marcus said. Rachel met his eyes. Neither do I. At 6:47 p.m., Marcus carried Ethan to his car. The boy had fallen asleep against his shoulder. Marcus buckled him into the back seat, got behind the wheel, and sat in the parking garage for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine. He called Denise. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus, is he okay? I've been calling for 2 hours." "He's with me. He's safe. He's asleep." "What happened?" "I got a call from the airline, some man talking about an incident, and he wouldn't tell me anything specific, and I've been losing my mind, Marcus. What happened to my baby?" Marcus closed his eyes. He gripped the steering wheel. "Denise, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to stay calm." "Don't tell me to stay calm. Tell me what happened." A flight attendant on his plane grabbed Ethan by the hair and spat on him. Silence. "Denise?" "Say that again?" "A flight attendant grabbed our son by the hair and spat in his face because he spilled orange juice." The sound that came through the phone was not a scream. It was deeper than that. It was the sound of a mother's body processing something that her mind could not yet accept. A low, guttural moan that built into a wail that Marcus had to hold the phone away from his ear to bear. "I'm going to kill her," Denise said. "Marcus, I swear to God." "No, we're going to do this the right way." "The right way? She spit on my son. She put her hands on my baby." "I know, Denise, I know. And she's going to pay for it, but not like that. We're going to do this so it sticks, so it matters. I've already spoken to an attorney." "An attorney? When?" "She was on the flight. She witnessed the whole thing. She stepped in, Denise. She stood up for Ethan when nobody else did." Denise was crying. Hard, ragged sobs that came through the phone in waves. "Is he hurt? Does he have marks?" "I haven't checked yet. He fell asleep. I'll look tonight and send you photos." "I want to see him. I want to fly out there." "Come, book a flight tonight. I'll pick you up." "Marcus, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't let this disappear. Promise me she doesn't just get fired and walk away. I promise you, Denise, on everything I am, this is not going to disappear." He hung up. He looked in the rearview mirror at his son, asleep in the back seat, still wearing the orange juice-stained shirt, his small face pressed against the seatbelt. And for the first time that day, Marcus Brooks let himself feel the full weight of what had been done to his child. His hands shook, his jaw locked, his eyes burned. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and breathed. 1 breath. 2. 3. He counted to 10 the way he had learned in the Army. Then he started the car and drove his son home. By 8 p.m., the story had a name. The hashtag was everywhere. Every network was running it. Cable news had panels assembled. Commentators were calling it one of the most disturbing incidents of anti-Black hostility in air travel in recent memory. Former employees of the airline began talking, not on camera, not yet, but in threads, in direct messages, in anonymous posts that spread like brushfire. A woman who had worked as a flight attendant for the same airline for 6 years wrote, "Melissa Grant was reported at least 3 times that I know of. Once for making a comment about a Muslim passenger's headscarf, once for refusing to serve a Latino family in first class until they showed their boarding passes twice, and once for calling a Black female pilot the N-word in the crew lounge. Nothing happened. Nothing ever happened." Another former employee wrote, "We all knew. Everyone on her crew knew. She was protected because she had seniority and because the union rep was her friend. Complaints went into a file, and the file went into a drawer, and the drawer stayed shut." These posts were screenshot and shared again until they were no longer anonymous whispers, but public accusations that demanded public answers. At 9:15 p.m., the airline's communications team held an emergency internal call. The CEO was on the line. The general counsel was on the line. The head of public relations was on the line. The VP of human resources was on the line. 4 executives and 11 senior managers, all staring at the same social media dashboard that showed a story growing faster than anything they had seen in 20 years of crisis management. "Where are we?" the CEO asked. The head of PR, a woman named Sandra Okafor, pulled up the numbers. 4 separate videos. Combined views as of right now, 11 million. National coverage on every major outlet. International pickup starting in the UK and Australia. The hashtag has been trending #1 for the last 90 minutes. What has the airline said publicly? Nothing. We put out a holding statement at 5:30 saying we were aware of an incident and investigating. That's not going to hold. No, sir, it is not. The general counsel spoke up. We need to be careful about what we say. There are legal implications. If we admit fault publicly before the investigation is complete, we expose ourselves. We expose ourselves, the CEO said. There are 4 videos of our employee spitting on an 8-year-old black child. We are already exposed. The question is whether we get in front of this tonight or whether we wake up tomorrow and it's twice as bad. Silence on the line. Sandra, draft a statement. I want to deliver it personally. Press conference. Tonight if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest. Yes, sir. And get me Melissa Grant's full personnel file. Every complaint, every write-up, every single document. I want it on my desk in 1 hour. Sir, there may be union considerations. I don't care about union considerations. I care about the fact that we have an employee who assaulted a child, and we may have known she was a problem and did nothing about it. Get me the file. The call ended at 9:41 p.m. At 10 p.m., Marcus put Ethan to bed. The boy had woken up during the drive and been quiet. He had eaten half a sandwich. He had taken a bath. He had let his father check his scalp, where there were no visible bruises, but a tenderness that made him flinch when Marcus touched the top of his head. Marcus photographed everything: the scalp, the shirt, Ethan's face. He did it gently, explaining each photo, telling Ethan it was like going to the doctor. "Daddy? Yeah, buddy. That lady on the plane, is she going to come back?" "No, she is never going to come near you again. She said I was trouble." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. He took Ethan's hand. "Listen to me. You are not trouble. You have never been trouble. That woman was wrong. She was wrong in what she did, and she was wrong in what she said, and she is going to answer for it. She pulled my hair really hard." "I know." "And she spit on me." "I know, buddy." "Why?" Marcus had prepared himself for this question. He had rehearsed an answer in his head during the drive. He had thought about how to explain hatred to an 8-year-old, how to explain that some people look at a black child and see something other than a child. He had practiced the words, but sitting there on the edge of his son's bed, looking at those big brown eyes, he couldn't say any of it. The rehearsed words fell apart. "Because she's broken," Marcus said. "Some people are broken inside in a way that makes them hurt other people, especially people who can't fight back. It's not your fault. It was never your fault." Rachel said that too. Rachel was right. She was nice. She was, and she's going to help us. Ethan pulled the blanket up to his chin. "Daddy, can you stay till I fall asleep?" "I'm not going anywhere." Marcus sat on that bed for 45 minutes until his son's breathing slowed and his grip on the blanket loosened and his face finally relaxed. Then Marcus stood up, walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and opened his phone. 11 million views. That was the number as of 10:30 p.m. He scrolled through the comments, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Strangers from every state, from other countries, from every walk of life, all saying the same thing: protect that boy, fire that woman, hold them accountable. He read a comment from a woman in Detroit. "I'm a grandmother. I have 3 grandbabies. If someone ever put their hands on my grandchild like that, there would be no conversation. God bless that little boy. God bless his parents." He read a comment from a man in Houston. "I'm a grown man sitting here crying. That baby said sorry. He said sorry while she was hurting him. That broke me. He read a comment from a teenager in Brooklyn. This is why we don't trust them. This is why we stay angry. Because they see our kids and they don't see kids. Marcus put his phone down. He leaned back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. At 11:15 p.m., his phone rang. It was Rachel. I'm sorry to call so late. Have you seen the news? I've seen some of it. The airline is preparing a public statement. My sources say the CEO is going to deliver it personally, probably tomorrow morning. What are they going to say? They're going to apologize. They're going to announce that Melissa Grant has been terminated, and they're going to promise a full review of internal policies. That's not enough. No, it's not, but it's the first move, and we need to be ready with ours. What are you thinking? Rachel paused. I'm thinking we don't let them control this narrative. I'm thinking Ethan's story deserves more than a corporate press conference and a severance package for the woman who hurt him. I'm thinking we push for real change, training, accountability, an independent review, and I'm thinking we do it publicly. Marcus was quiet. Mr. Brooks? Marcus. Call me Marcus. Marcus. I need to know how far you're willing to go with this. He looked down the hallway toward Ethan's room. The door was cracked. The nightlight was on. His son was sleeping with every light in the room burning because he was afraid of the dark now in ways he hadn't been before today. All the way, Marcus said. I'll go all the way. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be long. Marcus hung up. He walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water and drank it standing at the counter in the dark. He thought about Denise, who was on a red-eye from Atlanta, probably somewhere over Texas right now, probably not sleeping, probably staring out a window at nothing. He thought about Ethan asking if he was in trouble. He thought about the word trouble in a woman's mouth aimed at his son. He thought about Gerald Patterson's napkin, which an officer had passed to him at the gate. I am sorry I didn't stand sooner, but I will stand for you now. Marcus folded that napkin and put it in his wallet. At midnight Pacific time, 22 million people had seen the videos. Melissa Grant's name was on every screen in America. The airline stock had dropped 3 points in after-hours trading. 6 civil rights organizations had released statements. 2 senators had called for a federal review of airline policies regarding unaccompanied minors. And in a small bedroom in Los Angeles, Ethan Brooks was dreaming. His father didn't know what he was dreaming about. He only knew that at 12:17 a.m., his son screamed. Marcus was there in 4 seconds. He burst through the door and found Ethan sitting up in bed, his eyes wide, his chest heaving, his hands clawing at the top of his head. "She's pulling my hair! Daddy, she's pulling my hair!" "Ethan, wake up. Look at me. It's Daddy. You're home. You're safe." "She won't let go." Marcus grabbed his son and held him. Ethan fought for a moment, thrashing, lost somewhere between the dream and the room. Then he found his father's voice and his father's arms, and he collapsed against Marcus's chest and cried. Marcus held him and rocked him and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. There was no sentence in any language that could undo what had been done to his child. There was only this, being there, holding on, staying. At 12:34 a.m., Ethan fell back asleep. Marcus laid him down, pulled the blanket up, and sat on the floor next to the bed with his back against the wall. He did not go back to the couch. He did not go to his own room. He stayed right there, on the floor, wide awake, watching his son breathe. His phone buzzed, a text from Denise. "Landing at 6 a.m., I love you both." Marcus typed back, "He's sleeping. I'm right next to him. We're going to fix this." He put the phone down and sat in the dark and listened to his son breathe and waited for morning and whatever it would bring. Denise's plane touched down at LAX at 6:02 a.m. She hadn't slept, not 1 minute. She had sat in her seat for 5 hours and 14 minutes with her hands balled into fists and her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The woman next to her had asked if she was okay, somewhere over New Mexico. Denise had said yes. That was a lie. She was not okay. She was not anywhere close to okay. Marcus was waiting at arrivals with Ethan. The boy was holding his father's hand and wearing a clean shirt and looking at the floor. When Denise came through the doors, she saw her son before she saw anything else. Her bag hit the ground and she ran. "Baby, oh my God, baby, come here!" Ethan let go of his father's hand and walked into his mother's arms. He didn't run, he walked. Like something inside him had slowed down overnight, like the boy who used to sprint across rooms had been replaced by someone more careful. Denise dropped to her knees and wrapped herself around him. She held the back of his head with one hand and pressed his face into her shoulder and made a sound that wasn't crying and wasn't speaking. It was something in between, something animal, something that every parent in that terminal understood. "Let me see you." She pulled back and held his face. She looked at his eyes. She turned his head gently and touched the top of his scalp where Melissa had grabbed him. Ethan flinched. Denise's face changed. The grief snapped into something harder. "Does that hurt?" "A little." "Where else? Show me where else." "Just there, Mama. She only grabbed there." Denise pulled him close again. She looked up at Marcus over Ethan's head. Her eyes were red and dry and absolutely furious. "Where is she?" Denise said. "She was terminated last night. The airline called me at 11. "Terminated. That's it?" "That's their first move. It's not their last. Rachel says they're going to do a press conference this morning." "Rachel? The lawyer?" "She was on the plane. She's the one who stopped it." Denise stood up. She took Ethan's hand in her left and grabbed her bag with her right. "Take me to her." They drove to Marcus's apartment. Ethan sat in the back seat, quiet, watching the city pass. Denise turned around 3 times to look at him. Each time he gave her a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. At 7:30 a.m., Rachel arrived at Marcus's apartment. She had a leather bag with a legal pad and a laptop and 2 copies of a document she had drafted at 4 a.m. after giving up on sleep. Denise opened the door. The 2 women looked at each other for a long moment. Denise was shorter, thicker, with braids pulled back and eyes that could cut steel. Rachel was taller, leaner, dressed in the same clothes she had worn on the plane yesterday. "You're the one who stood up for my son," Denise said. "Yes, ma'am." Denise grabbed her and hugged her. Hard. The kind of hug that says more than 10 minutes of talking. Rachel hugged her back. "Thank you," Denise whispered. "Thank you for not looking away." They sat at the kitchen table. Ethan was in the living room watching cartoons, close enough to hear their voices, but far enough that the words blurred. Marcus had done that on purpose. Rachel opened her laptop. "Here's where we are. The airline terminated Melissa Grant at approximately 10:45 last night. They released a written statement at midnight calling the incident unacceptable and confirming her dismissal. The CEO is holding a press conference at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is 90 minutes from now." "What do you expect him to say?" Marcus asked. "He's going to apologize. He's going to distance the airline from Melissa. He's going to announce some kind of policy review. And he's going to do everything in his power to make this story about one bad employee rather than a systemic failure." "Is it systemic?" Denise asked. Rachel looked at her. "I spent last night pulling every public record, every anonymous report, every social media post from former employees I could find. Melissa Grant had at least 3 formal complaints against her in the last 8 years. Racial comments, discriminatory behavior, 1 incident involving a slur directed at a black pilot. None of them resulted in meaningful discipline." Denise's hands went flat on the table. 3 complaints. And they still let her near passengers. They still let her near children. The union protected her. Seniority protected her. And the airline's internal review process, from what I can tell, was designed to manage liability, not to protect passengers. Marcus leaned forward. "So what do we do with that?" "We have 2 options. Option 1, we negotiate privately. The airline offers a settlement, an apology, maybe a policy change. It's faster. It's quieter. Ethan's name stays out of the press." "And option 2? "Option 2, we go public. We file a formal complaint with the FAA. We demand an independent investigation into the airline's handling of prior complaints against Melissa Grant. We push for federal legislation mandating bias training for all airline personnel. We make this about every child who has ever been mistreated on a flight, not just Ethan. Marcus looked at Denise. Denise looked at Marcus. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think my son had nightmares last night because a woman spit on his face. And I think if we stay quiet, the next mother gets the same phone call I got." Marcus nodded. He turned to Rachel. "Option 2? Rachel closed her laptop. "Then we need to move fast. The airline's press conference is in 80 minutes. I want to hold ours within 2 hours of theirs. We get ahead of their narrative. We don't let them frame this as resolved." At 9 a.m. sharp, the airline's CEO, a man named Richard Holt, walked to a podium at the airline's Los Angeles headquarters. 37 cameras were pointed at him. Every seat in the press room was full. The back wall was lined with reporters who couldn't find chairs. Richard Holt was 60 years old, silver-haired, and had run the airline for 7 years. He had handled labor disputes, fuel crises, and a pandemic. He had never faced anything like this. "Good morning. I'm here to address the incident that occurred yesterday on Flight 341 from Atlanta to Los Angeles." He paused. He gripped the sides of the podium. What happened on that aircraft was reprehensible. A member of our cabin crew physically assaulted an 8-year-old child who was traveling alone under our care. She grabbed him, she verbally abused him, and she spat on him. There is no excuse for this behavior. None. The room was silent. Cameras clicked. Melissa Grant was terminated last night, effective immediately. She will never work for this airline again. I have personally ensured that her conduct record has been flagged in industry databases. He took a breath. But I also know that firing one person is not enough. This incident has exposed failures in our internal oversight. I have ordered a full review of our complaint handling process, our crew training protocols, and our policies regarding unaccompanied minors. We will bring in external consultants to conduct this review, and we will publish the findings. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Holt, is it true that Melissa Grant had prior complaints on her record?" Richard Holt's jaw tightened. "I can confirm that there were previous incidents documented in her personnel file." "How many?" "I'm not prepared to discuss specific numbers at this time." "Mr. Holt, if the airline knew she had a history of discriminatory behavior, why was she still working with passengers?" "That is exactly the question our internal review will answer." "Mr. Holt, has the airline reached out to the Brooks family?" "We have made initial contact, yes." "What was their response?" "I'm not going to speak for the family. They deserve to tell their own story in their own time." The press conference lasted 22 minutes. Richard Holt left the podium without taking further questions. His communications director walked him down a back hallway where no cameras could follow. "How bad is it?" Holt asked. Sandra Okafor, the head of PR, was walking beside him with her phone in her hand. "The prior complaints are going to be the story, not the termination. The termination was expected. The cover-up is what people are going to focus on." "It wasn't a cover-up." "It looks like one, and in public relations, what it looks like is what it is." "What's the stock doing?" "Down 6% since market open." Holt stopped walking. 6%? "And the Brooks family has retained an attorney, Rachel Monroe, Civil Rights, Chicago. She's good." "How good?" "Very good." At 11 a.m., Rachel Monroe stood at a different podium in a conference room at a hotel 3 miles from the airline's headquarters. The room was smaller, fewer cameras, but every major outlet was there because the story had become the only story in America. Denise stood to Rachel's left. Marcus stood to Rachel's right. Ethan was not present. They had agreed on that. He was with Marcus's sister at the apartment, watching a movie, eating cereal, being allowed to be a child for a few hours. Rachel adjusted the microphone. "My name is Rachel Monroe. I am a civil rights attorney with Whitfield and Associates in Chicago. I was a passenger on Flight 341 yesterday. I witnessed the assault on Ethan Brooks, and I am now representing his family." She paused. "You've seen the videos. You've heard the airline's statement. I want to tell you what the videos don't show. They don't show an 8-year-old boy asking me if he was in trouble. They don't show a child who woke up screaming at midnight because he dreamed a woman was pulling his hair. They don't show a mother flying across the country in the middle of the night because her son was attacked by someone who was supposed to protect him. The room was still. The airline fired Melissa Grant. That is the minimum. That is not justice. Justice is asking why a woman with at least 3 documented complaints for racial discrimination was allowed to continue working in close contact with vulnerable passengers, including children. Justice is asking what systems failed and who allowed them to fail. A reporter raised a hand. Ms. Monroe, are you planning to file a lawsuit? We are exploring every legal avenue available to us, including federal complaints and civil litigation. But I want to be clear about something. This family is not here for money. Marcus and Denise Brooks are here because they want to make sure that no other child goes through what their son went through. Another reporter. Can you tell us about Ethan's condition? Rachel looked at Denise. Denise stepped to the microphone. Her voice shook. She gripped the podium, but she spoke. My son is 8 years old. He has never been in trouble a day in his life. He says please and thank you and yes ma'am and no sir. I put him on that plane because I trusted the airline to take care of him. I trusted them. And a woman who works for them grabbed my baby by his hair and spit on his face because he spilled a cup of juice. She stopped. She breathed. He asked his father last night if he did something wrong. My son thinks he did something wrong. That's what this woman did to him. She made my child believe that he deserved what happened to him. Denise stepped back. Marcus put his arm around her. A reporter from a national outlet stood up. Mr. Brooks, do you have anything you'd like to say? Marcus leaned toward the microphone. He didn't grip the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke the way he always spoke. Measured. Clear. Unbreakable. My son's name is Ethan. He's 8. He likes to draw. He likes basketball. He's scared of thunderstorms. He's the bravest kid I know. Yesterday, a grown woman in a position of power and trust looked at my son and saw something less than human. She treated him like he was nothing. And when he responded with the only words he knew, "I'm sorry, ma'am," she spit on him. He paused. I'm not angry. I am past angry. I am resolved. We are going to make sure this airline and every airline understands that our children are not disposable. Our children are not trouble. Our children deserve the same safety, the same dignity, and the same protection as every other child on every flight in this country. The press conference aired live. 38 million people watched clips of it within 4 hours. By 2 p.m., the story had shifted. The airline's firing of Melissa Grant was no longer the headline. The headline was the cover-up. The 3 prior complaints, the failure to act, the system that had allowed a woman with a documented pattern of racial hostility to keep working with passengers for 8 years. At 2:47 p.m., Javi Reyes sat in a small office at the airline's Employee Center in Los Angeles. Across from him sat 2 investigators from the airline's Internal Affairs Division. They had notepads. They had a recorder. They had the expression of people who already knew the answers, but needed the words on tape. Mr. Reyes, can you describe what you witnessed yesterday on Flight 341? Javi's hands were folded in his lap. He had spent the night awake, staring at his ceiling, replaying every moment. He had called his mother in San Antonio and told her what happened, and she had cried and said, "Mijo, you do the right thing." He had called his union rep, who had told him to be careful. He had ignored the union rep. The boy spilled his juice. The turbulence knocked it off his tray. Melissa went to his row and yelled at him. Then she grabbed his hair and yanked his head back. Then she spit on him. Did you intervene? Javi swallowed. No, not during the incident. Why not? Because I was afraid of her. Melissa had a reputation. She'd gotten other junior crew members transferred or written up for challenging her. I was afraid that if I stepped in, she'd end my career. But you filed an incident report. After, when she was in the forward galley, I went to the back and filed it on my phone. Mr. Reyes, were you aware of previous complaints against Miss Grant? Javi looked at the investigators. He knew what this question meant. He knew that his answer would go into a file, and that file would go to lawyers, and those lawyers would use it in ways he could not control. Yes, he said, I knew. Everyone on her crew knew. She made comments about passengers of color regularly. She was more aggressive with Black and Latino passengers. She was slower to serve them. She gave them less. Everyone saw it. Nobody reported it because nobody believed it would matter. Why didn't you believe it would matter? Because she'd been reported before and she was still there. She was always still there. You could complain about Melissa Grant 10 times and nothing would happen because she had seniority and because the people in charge didn't want the headache. The investigator wrote something down. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Javi thought about Marco, 7 years old, big brown eyes, his nephew who loved airplanes and wanted to be a pilot someday. That boy looked at me when he was boarding the plane. He looked right at me and smiled, and I smiled back and told him to have a good flight. And then, when that woman grabbed him, I froze. I stood there and I froze. I'm 26 years old, and I was too scared to stop a 51-year-old woman from hurting a child. His voice cracked. I filed the report. That's what I did. But I should have done more. I should have walked down that aisle and taken her hand off that boy's head. And I will carry that for the rest of my life. The investigators looked at each other. One of them reached across the table and turned off the recorder. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. That will be all for now. Javi stood up. His legs felt weak. He walked out of the office and down a hallway and out a side door into the parking lot. He sat on a concrete barrier and put his head in his hands and stayed there for 20 minutes. At 4 p.m., Rachel received a call from the airline's legal department. A senior attorney named Howard Pike, smooth voice, expensive words. Ms. Monroe, I'm calling to open a dialogue regarding the Brooks family and the incident on Flight 341. The airline would like to express its deepest regret and begin discussions about a resolution. What kind of resolution? We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement, compensation for the family's distress, medical costs for any treatment the child may need, and a personal written apology from the CEO. How much? Howard Pike named a number. It was large, larger than Rachel had expected this quickly. That's a starting point, Rachel said, but the family's primary concern is not financial. What are their concerns? An independent external investigation into the airline's handling of prior complaints against Melissa Grant. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training for all cabin crew, conducted by an outside firm, not your internal HR team. A federally reportable accountability system for passenger complaints involving discrimination. And funding for a youth travel protection initiative. Silence on the line. Ms. Monroe, some of those demands go well beyond the scope of a single incident. This is not a single incident, Mr. Pike. Your own personnel records show at least 3 prior complaints. Your former employees are going on record saying this was a pattern. This is systemic, and my clients want systemic change. I'll need to discuss this with our leadership team. Take your time, but understand that every day you take is a day the story stays in the news, and it's not going away. She hung up. At 6 p.m., Marcus got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He answered it. Mr. Brooks, my name is Gerald Patterson. I was on the plane with your son yesterday. I was sitting in row 9. Marcus remembered. The napkin. I am sorry I didn't stand sooner, but I will stand for you now. I got your note, Mr. Patterson. I meant every word. Mr. Brooks, I'm a deacon at my church back in Marietta. I've been involved in community advocacy for 40 years. I want you to know that my congregation is behind you. We've already started a letter writing campaign to the airline, and we've reached out to 4 other churches in the Atlanta area. Marcus sat down. He pressed his hand against his forehead. Mr. Patterson, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. I sat in my seat yesterday and did nothing while your boy was being hurt. I've marched, Mr. Brooks. I've stood on picket lines. I've been spit on myself. And yesterday, I sat still. That's not going to happen again. Not for your son, not for anyone. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. I owe you. I owe your boy. You let me know what you need, and I'll move heaven and earth." Marcus hung up and stared at the phone in his hand. Denise was putting Ethan to bed. He could hear her voice through the wall, soft, singing something low, the same song she had sung since Ethan was a baby. His phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Airline made an offer. We turned it down. They'll come back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we push." Marcus didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, reading every article, every comment, every post. He read about other families, other children, other flights. Stories from mothers and fathers who had sent their kids into the sky and gotten them back damaged. Stories that had never made the news. Stories that had disappeared into complaint boxes and voicemail systems and the vast, indifferent machinery of an industry that moved 4 billion passengers a year and couldn't protect one 8-year-old boy. At 11:58 p.m., 43 hours after Melissa Grant had grabbed his son's hair, Marcus Brooks closed his laptop and walked to Ethan's room. The boy was asleep. The nightlight was on. Denise was asleep next to him, on top of the covers, still in her clothes, one arm draped across their son. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched them breathe. He thought about what Rachel had said. Every day the story stays in the news. He thought about what Gerald Patterson had said. "I will stand for you now." He thought about Ethan asking, "Did I do something wrong?" And he made a promise, not out loud, not to anyone but himself. He promised that his son's pain would not be wasted, that this story would not end with a check and an apology and a news cycle that moved on, that Ethan Brooks, the quiet boy who said sorry while a stranger held his hair, would be the reason something changed. He closed the door and went to the living room and sat in the dark and waited for dawn. Dawn came at 5:41 a.m., and Marcus was already awake. He had not slept. He had spent the last 5 hours at the kitchen table reading every legal document Rachel had sent him, every news article that mentioned his son's name, and every anonymous account from former airline employees that had surfaced overnight. There were now 9 of them. 9 people who had worked alongside Melissa Grant and watched her treat passengers of color differently for years. 9 people who had stayed silent until a video made silence impossible. Marcus poured coffee. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. He had spent 12 years in the Army and 6 years running logistics for a company that moved freight across 19 states. He knew how to operate on no sleep. He knew how to function when everything inside him was screaming. At 6:15 a.m., Denise walked into the kitchen. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her braids were loose. "How is he?" Marcus asked. He woke up twice, once at 2, once around 4. He didn't scream this time. He just sat up and looked around the room like he was checking. Checking for what? For her. Marcus set his coffee down. He pressed his palms flat against the counter and breathed. "Rachel's coming at 8, he said. The airline came back overnight with a second offer." "Already?" "They're scared, Denise. Their stock dropped 8% at yesterday's close. The board is in emergency session." "Good. They should be scared." At 7 a.m., Ethan padded into the kitchen in his pajamas. He stood in the doorway and looked at both of his parents with an expression that made Denise's breath catch. It was the look of a child who was gauging the room before entering it. The look of a child who had learned in the space of one afternoon that the world could turn on him without warning. "Morning, baby," Denise said. "You hungry?" He nodded. He sat at the table. He ate half a bowl of cereal and drank a glass of milk and didn't speak until he was almost finished. "Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Is the lady from the plane on TV?" Denise and Marcus looked at each other. "Why do you ask that?" Marcus said carefully. "I heard the TV last night when you were watching. I heard her name." Marcus pushed his chair back and moved next to his son. "Ethan, you don't need to worry about her. She's not going to bother you again. But people are mad at her?" "Yes, people are mad at what she did." "Are people mad at me?" Denise made a sound, small, involuntary, like someone had pressed a bruise she didn't know she had. "No one is mad at you," she said. "No one, Ethan. People are mad because a grown-up hurt a kid. That's wrong. And when grown-ups do wrong things, other grown-ups have to make it right. Ethan pushed his cereal around with his spoon. The kids at school are going to see it. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He hadn't thought about that. The videos, the news coverage, Ethan's face broadcast to the world, his son's worst moment, replayed and shared and commented on by strangers, and eventually, inevitably, by classmates. We'll deal with that, Marcus said, together. But right now, I need you to know something. You are not what happened to you on that plane. You are Ethan Brooks. You are brave and kind and good. And nothing that woman did changes that. Ethan looked at his father. Something moved behind his eyes. Not belief, not yet, but the beginning of something. A crack in the wall he had built overnight. Okay, Daddy. Rachel arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. She had a new suit on, her laptop under her arm, and a look on her face that Marcus recognized from his military days. The look of someone heading into a fight they intended to win. She sat down at the kitchen table. Denise brought her coffee. Rachel thanked her and opened her laptop. The airline made a second offer at 3 a.m. through their legal counsel. What's the number? Marcus asked. Rachel told them. It was more than double the first offer. Denise's eyebrows went up. Marcus's expression didn't change. They also agreed in principle to mandatory bias training and an external review of their complaint process, Rachel continued. In principle, Marcus said. Exactly. In principle means nothing until it's in writing with timelines and enforcement mechanisms. Right now, it's a gesture. What about the Youth Travel Protection Program? They didn't mention it. Denise leaned forward. So they'll throw money at us, but they won't actually protect other kids. That's the pattern, Rachel said. Corporations settle to make the story go away. They announce reforms that sound good in a press release. 6 months later, nothing has changed. I've seen it a dozen times. Then what do we need to do to make sure this time is different? Marcus asked. Rachel pulled a document from her bag. I drafted this last night. It's a list of non-negotiable demands, not requests, demands. Every one of them has a timeline, a reporting requirement, and an enforcement clause. If the airline agrees to these, we settle. If they don't, we file. Marcus took the document. He read it slowly. Denise read over his shoulder. This is thorough, Marcus said. This is what systemic change looks like on paper. Now we have to make them sign it. At 9 a.m., something happened that none of them expected. Rachel's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression changed. She held up a finger, stood up, and walked into the hallway. She came back 2 minutes later. Her face was different, sharper. That was a producer from a national morning show. They want Ethan to appear on camera. Denise's head snapped up. Absolutely not. I told them no. But here's why I'm telling you. They're not the first call I've gotten this morning. I've had requests from 4 networks, 2 podcasts, and a documentary filmmaker. Everyone wants Ethan's face, Ethan's voice, Ethan's story. He's 8 years old, Denise said. He's not a story. He's my child. I agree completely, but I want you to understand the pressure that's going to come. The airline knows this too. They know that the longer this stays in the media, the more damage it does. Part of their strategy is to settle fast so the cameras move on. Marcus was quiet. He was thinking. What if we use it, he said. Rachel looked at him. Use what? The attention. Not Ethan. We keep Ethan out of it. But the attention itself. What if instead of running from the cameras, we direct them? What do you mean? I mean we hold another press conference. Not about the settlement, not about the airline. About every family this has happened to. We invite them to come forward. We create a record. We build a case so big that the airline can't settle their way out of it. Rachel sat back in her chair. She looked at Marcus for a long time. Then she smiled. It was the first real smile she had allowed herself since Flight 341. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. At 10:30 a.m., the airline's legal team called Rachel for the 3rd time. Howard Pike's voice was tighter now. The smooth edges were wearing down. Ms. Monroe, my client is prepared to increase the financial component of the settlement significantly. We're also prepared to commit to a written timeline for the bias training initiative. And the external investigation? We're open to a third-party audit of relevant personnel files. Not an audit, an investigation conducted by an independent firm with subpoena-level access to all complaint records, not just Melissa Grant's file. Every complaint filed in the last 10 years involving racial or ethnic discrimination. That's an extraordinary ask. This is an extraordinary situation. Your employee spat on a child, Mr. Pike, on camera in front of 60 witnesses, and your company had 3 prior warnings that she was dangerous and did nothing. I'll take it back to leadership. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, we file with the FAA and we hold a second press conference. Rachel hung up. She looked at Marcus and Denise. They're going to push back on the investigation. That's the piece that scares them most. An external investigation means someone outside the company gets to look at every complaint they buried, every warning they ignored, every time they chose convenience over accountability. They should be scared, Denise said. At 12 p.m., something shifted in the public narrative that caught everyone off guard. Melissa Grant gave an interview. She had hired an attorney of her own, a man named Craig Duvall, who specialized in employment disputes and wrongful termination. They appeared together on a cable news segment filmed at Duvall's office. Melissa sat in a leather chair wearing a blue blazer and no expression. She looked directly at the camera. I want to be clear about what happened on that flight. The child was unruly. He was unsupervised. He had been causing problems since boarding. I responded the way any experienced crew member would respond, to maintain cabin safety. The interviewer leaned forward. Ms. Grant, the video shows you grabbing the child by his hair. It shows you spitting on or near his face. How is that maintaining cabin safety? The video doesn't show everything. It doesn't show the full context. That child had been banging on the tray table. He had been kicking the seat in front of him. He had been ignoring repeated requests to calm down. Passengers on the flight have disputed that account. Multiple witnesses say the child was quiet and well-behaved. Passengers don't see what flight attendants see. We're trained to identify disruptive behavior. That's our job. Did you use a racial slur or make a racially charged comment to the child? Melissa's jaw tightened. I said, kids like you. I meant kids who fly alone, kids who don't have supervision. It had nothing to do with race. The interview lasted 11 minutes. It aired at 12:15 p.m. Pacific Time. Within 30 minutes, it had backfired so completely that Craig Duvall's office phone stopped accepting calls. Because the internet remembered. The internet always remembers. Within an hour, social media users had pulled every anonymous account from former colleagues, every prior complaint summary, every piece of evidence that painted a pattern. They laid it side by side with Melissa's claims. They showed the videos again, zoomed in, slowed down, annotated. They showed Ethan sitting perfectly still before the spill. They showed his hands in his lap. They showed him buckled in his seat, quiet, motionless, afraid. Kids like you had nothing to do with race. The internet did not believe that. America did not believe that. At 1:30 p.m., Rachel showed Marcus and Denise the interview on her phone. Denise watched it with her arms crossed and her jaw so tight the muscles in her neck were visible. She's lying, Denise said. She's sitting there in a blazer lying about my son on national television. She is, Rachel said, and it's the best thing that could have happened for our case. Marcus looked at her. How? Because she just went on camera and called Ethan disruptive. She just told the country that a boy who sat quietly in his seat and said yes, ma'am, and please, was a problem child. Every parent watching that interview, black, white, every color, knows she's lying. She lost whatever sympathy she might have had. She never had sympathy, Denise said. Some people would have given her the benefit of the doubt. Not anymore. She just destroyed her own defense. At 2 p.m., Ethan was sitting on the couch in Marcus's living room, drawing with crayons that Marcus's sister Linda had bought him that morning. He was drawing airplanes. Denise had noticed and said nothing. She sat across the room watching him with an ache in her chest that hadn't stopped since Atlanta. Linda came and sat next to Denise. She was Marcus's older sister, 52, a school administrator, calm and practical in the way that oldest siblings often are. How are you holding up? Linda asked quietly. I'm not. He's going to be okay, Denise. Is he? He drew 4 airplanes and every single one of them has a person standing in the aisle. He drew her, Linda. He drew the woman in every picture. Linda looked at the drawings. She saw it. A small figure in a seat, a larger figure standing over him. The same image repeated 4 times. He needs to talk to someone, Linda said. A professional. I know. Rachel recommended a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. We have an appointment Thursday. Good. That's good. Denise wiped her eyes. He asked me this morning if the kids at school would see the videos. He's 8, Linda. He's worrying about what 3rd graders are going to say about him. Linda took Denise's hand. Then we make sure he has people around him who remind him who he is. Every single day. At 3:15 p.m., the airline's internal investigation produced a finding that would change the trajectory of everything. Rachel received a call from a source inside the airline, not Howard Pike, someone lower, someone with access to HR files, who had decided that conscience outweighed career. Ms. Monroe, I can't give you my name, but I need you to know something. Melissa Grant's personnel file contains 5 complaints, not 3. 2 of them were removed from the active file in 2019 by a regional HR director named Tom Caldwell. He reclassified them as resolved and sealed them. Rachel's grip tightened on her phone. Sealed them on what basis? No basis. He did it as a favor. Melissa and Tom were close. She had covered shifts for his daughter-in-law, who also worked for the airline. It was a personal arrangement. Do you have documentation? I have the original complaint numbers and the dates they were reclassified. That's all I can give you. That's enough. Thank you. Rachel hung up. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear, from the kind of adrenaline that comes when a case breaks wide open. She walked into the kitchen where Marcus was on the phone with his own office, managing his team remotely. He saw her face and ended the call. What happened? 5 complaints, not 3. 2 were buried by an HR director who was personally connected to Melissa Grant. He sealed them and reclassified them as resolved. Marcus stared at her. That's a cover-up. That's a cover-up. And it means the airline's liability just tripled. They didn't just fail to act. Someone inside actively concealed evidence of her behavior. What do we do with this? We use it. At 5 o'clock, when their deadline hits, we don't just threaten to file. We tell them we know about the sealed complaints. We tell them we know about Tom Caldwell. And we let them decide how they want this to play out. At 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the deadline, Rachel called Howard Pike. Mr. Pike, before you give me your client's answer, I need to share some new information with you. I'm listening. We have evidence that Melissa Grant's personnel file originally contained 5 complaints, not 3. 2 complaints were removed and reclassified by a regional HR director named Tom Caldwell in 2019. Mr. Caldwell had a personal relationship with Miss Grant. The reclassification was not conducted through standard HR procedures. Silence. Mr. Pike, where did you get this information? That's not relevant. What's relevant is that your client's exposure just expanded significantly. This isn't one rogue employee anymore. This is institutional concealment of a pattern of discriminatory behavior. I need to verify this internally before I can respond. You have until 5 o'clock. That was the deadline. It hasn't changed. Ms. Monroe, you're asking me to verify an explosive allegation in 15 minutes. I'm asking you to understand the position your client is in. You can verify internally over the next hour if you need to. But at 5 o'clock, if I don't have a substantive commitment to every item on our demand list, we file with the FAA tonight and we hold a press conference in the morning that includes the information about the sealed complaints. That would be extraordinarily damaging. Yes, it would. Howard Pike was quiet for 8 seconds, Rachel counted. I'll call you back within the hour, he said. He called back in 37 minutes. Ms. Monroe, the airline accepts your terms, all of them. The independent investigation with full access, the mandatory training program, the Youth Travel Protection Fund, the written timelines, and enforcement clauses. They agree to everything. Rachel closed her eyes. She breathed. I want it in writing by midnight tonight. You'll have it by 10. And I want a clause stipulating that Tom Caldwell is subject to the independent investigation. His actions regarding the sealed complaints must be reviewed. Another pause. Agreed. Rachel hung up. She sat at the kitchen table and put her hands flat on the surface and felt them shaking. Marcus was standing in the doorway. He had heard her side of the conversation. They agreed, he said, to everything. Denise appeared behind Marcus. Everything? Every single demand. The investigation, the training, the fund, all of it. They're sending the written agreement tonight. Denise put her hand over her mouth. Marcus put his arm around her. They stood there in the doorway of their kitchen while Rachel sat at the table, and for a moment, nobody spoke, because the weight of what had just happened was too large for words. Then Denise said, "This isn't just for Ethan." "No," Rachel said, "it's not." At 7 p.m., Marcus sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. The boy was in his pajamas, teeth brushed, blanket pulled up. Denise was in the doorway. "Ethan, I want to tell you something." "What, Daddy?" "Remember when you asked me if you did something wrong?" Ethan nodded. "The answer is no. And today some very important people agreed that the answer is no. The airline, the people who own the airplane you were on, they said what happened to you was wrong, and they're going to change things so it doesn't happen to other kids." "Other kids like me?" Marcus felt the words land in his chest. Other kids like me. The same phrase Melissa had used, transformed, reclaimed. Yes, other kids like you. Kids who are brave, kids who fly alone, kids who deserve to be treated right. Ethan was quiet. He pulled the blanket higher. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy." "Can I still like airplanes?" Marcus almost broke. He felt the crack run through him from his throat to his stomach. He held it. He held it because his son was watching, and his son needed him to hold it. "You can like anything you want. Airplanes, rockets, helicopters, anything." "Okay." "Okay." Marcus leaned down and kissed his son's forehead. He stood up and walked to the door where Denise was waiting. She took his hand. They walked into the hallway, and Denise closed the door to Ethan's room, leaving it cracked, leaving the nightlight on. In the hallway, Marcus leaned against the wall and exhaled. Denise put her arms around him and held on. "He asked if he can still like airplanes," Marcus whispered. Denise pressed her face against his chest. "He's going to be okay. We're going to make sure he's okay." At 9:47 p.m., the written agreement arrived in Rachel's email. 14 pages. Every clause, every timeline, every enforcement mechanism exactly as she had demanded. She read it twice, made 3 annotations, and sent it to her senior partner, James Whitfield, for review. James called her at 10:15. "This is one of the most comprehensive settlement agreements I've seen in 34 years of practice. How did you get them to agree to the external investigation?" They had 5 complaints on file. 2 were buried by an insider. Once they knew we knew, they had no choice. "Rachel, this is going to set a precedent." That's the point. At 10:30 p.m., Melissa Grant sat alone in her apartment in Atlanta. She had flown home that morning on a different airline, wearing sunglasses and a hat, sitting in the last row. Nobody recognized her, or if they did, they said nothing. Her phone had not stopped ringing for 2 days. She had stopped answering it. Her attorney had told her the airline settlement with the Brooks family included an independent investigation that would review her entire history. He had told her that Tom Caldwell, the man who had buried 2 of her complaints, had been suspended pending review. "What does that mean for me?" she had asked. "It means everything you've done is going to come out. All of it." Melissa sat in her apartment and stared at her phone and felt the walls closing in. 22 years. 22 years of service. Commendations, awards, seniority. All of it gone because of a cup of orange juice. And a boy who couldn't keep his hands steady during turbulence. That was how she saw it. Even now, even after the videos and the press conferences and the 60 million people who had watched her grab a child, she still believed she was the victim. And that was the most terrifying thing about Melissa Grant. Not the cruelty, not the spit, not the hand in a child's hair. It was the absolute, unshakable conviction that she had done nothing wrong. Her phone rang again. She looked at the screen. It was her sister. She declined the call. She sat in the dark, and she did not cry, and she did not reflect, and she did not change. She just sat there, alone, holding on to a version of herself that the rest of the world had already seen through. At midnight, 3 days after Flight 341, the agreement was signed. Rachel texted Marcus 2 words: "It's done." Marcus read the text. He walked to Ethan's room. His son was asleep. The nightlight cast a warm glow across the blanket. The drawings from that afternoon were on the nightstand. 4 airplanes, a figure in every aisle. Marcus picked up the drawings and looked at them for a long time. Then he put them back and sat on the floor next to his son's bed, the way he had done every night since the flight. He didn't need to stay. Ethan was sleeping peacefully. No screams, no thrashing, just the deep, steady breathing of a child who is beginning, slowly, to feel safe again. But Marcus stayed anyway, because that was what fathers do. They stay, even when the crisis passes, even when the fight is won. They stay. The agreement was signed, but the story was not over. Not for Ethan. Not for Marcus. Not for any of them. Because documents change policies. They don't change nightmares. They don't change the way a child flinches when a stranger raises their voice. They don't rebuild what was broken inside an 8-year-old boy on a Tuesday afternoon at 35,000 feet. 2 weeks after Flight 341, Ethan started seeing Dr. Amara Osei. She was a child psychologist who specialized in racial trauma. Her office was in Culver City, 12 minutes from Marcus's apartment. She had warm eyes and a low voice, and she never rushed. The first session, Ethan didn't speak. He sat in a chair across from Dr. Osei and stared at his shoes for 45 minutes. She didn't push. She let the silence breathe. Near the end, she placed a box of crayons and a blank sheet of paper on the table between them. "You don't have to draw," she said, "but they're here if you want them." Ethan picked up a crayon. Orange. He drew a rectangle. Then he drew a circle inside it. Then he stopped. "What's that?" Dr. Osei asked gently. "A cup," Ethan said. "Orange juice." "Can you tell me about it?" "It spilled." "What happened when it spilled?" Ethan put the crayon down. He didn't answer. But he came back the next week, and the week after that, and each time he drew a little more and said a little more, and the wall inside him came down brick by brick, so slowly that some weeks it felt like nothing had moved at all. By the 4th session, he drew the airplane again, but this time there was no figure standing in the aisle, just the plane, just the clouds, just a small boy in a window seat. Dr. Osei showed the drawing to Marcus afterward. "This is progress," she said. "He's starting to separate the experience from the fear. The woman is no longer in every picture." "But she's still in his head," Marcus said. "Yes, she will be for a while. Trauma doesn't leave on a schedule. But he's processing. He's moving. Is he going to be okay?" Dr. Osei looked at him with the honesty that Marcus had come to rely on. "He's going to carry this. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is who he becomes because of it. And that part, Mr. Brooks, is up to all of you." 3 weeks after the agreement was signed, the independent investigation began. The firm Rachel had insisted on, a national civil rights consulting group based in Washington, D.C., was given full access to the airline's internal records. They requested 10 years of complaint files. They interviewed 47 current employees and 22 former employees. They reviewed disciplinary records, HR correspondence, union grievance files, and internal memos. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Melissa Grant's 5 complaints were not an anomaly. The investigation uncovered a pattern across the airline's operations. In the previous decade, 112 formal complaints had been filed by passengers alleging racial or ethnic discrimination by cabin crew. Of those 112, 89 had been classified as resolved with no disciplinary action. 14 had resulted in written warnings. 7 had led to temporary reassignments. 2 had resulted in termination. Melissa Grant's was one of the 2, and it had only happened because 60 million people watched the video. The report was delivered to the airline's board of directors on a Thursday morning. It was 411 pages long. The executive summary alone was 32 pages. Rachel received her copy at noon. She read it in 3 hours. Then she called Marcus. "It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" 112 complaints in 10 years. 89 dismissed without action. The report identifies systemic failures at every level: HR, management, the union, the complaint review board. The whole system was designed to make problems disappear. Marcus was quiet for a long time. What happens now? The report will be shared with the FAA and the Department of Transportation. The airline is required under our agreement to publish a public summary within 30 days. And I'm going to make sure every member of Congress who sits on the Transportation Committee gets a copy. This isn't just about one airline anymore. No, it's not. This is industry-wide, and Ethan's case just blew the door open. Tom Caldwell, the HR director who had buried 2 of Melissa's complaints, was terminated 6 days after the investigation report was delivered. His dismissal was quiet. No press conference, no public statement, just a letter and a locked-out email account, and a career that ended with a box of desk items carried to a parking garage. Rachel made sure the termination was documented in the report's appendix. She wanted it on the record. She wanted the next Tom Caldwell at the next airline to know that sealed files don't stay sealed forever. At the airline's headquarters, Richard Holt ordered a company-wide stand-down. Every flight attendant, every gate agent, every crew supervisor in the system was required to complete a 40-hour training program developed by the external consulting firm. The program covered implicit bias, de-escalation, trauma-informed interaction with minors, and mandatory reporting for witnessed discrimination. It was the largest training overhaul in the airline's history. It cost $14 million. And it happened because an 8-year-old boy spilled a cup of orange juice. 5 weeks after the flight, Ethan went back to school. Denise had flown back to Atlanta. She had spent 2 weeks with Marcus and Ethan in Los Angeles, then returned to prepare for the new school year. She had spoken to Ethan's principal, his teacher, and the school counselor. She had explained what happened without going into details that would follow her son down hallways. "He may be quiet," Denise told his teacher, a woman named Mrs. Callahan. "He may not want to participate the way he used to. Please be patient with him." "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. We'll take care of him." Ethan's first day back was a Monday. He wore a new backpack that Marcus had sent from Los Angeles, blue with a small airplane keychain clipped to the zipper. Denise had almost removed it. She had stood at the front door with her fingers on the clip, wondering if it would remind him. Then she left it, because it was his choice, because he had clipped it there himself. He walked into school, and he was quiet. He sat in his seat, and he was quiet. At recess, he stood near the fence by himself, watching the other kids play. A boy named Jalen, who had been Ethan's friend since first grade, walked up to him. "Hey, Ethan, you want to play kickball?" Ethan looked at him. "Did you see the video?" Jalen shrugged. "My mom showed me. She said a mean lady was being mean to you. She said you didn't do nothing wrong." "People at school saw it?" "I don't know, maybe. But who cares? You want to play or not?" Ethan looked at the kickball field. He looked at Jalen. He looked at the fence. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." He played kickball. He wasn't very good. He missed the ball twice and laughed about it the second time. It was a small laugh, barely there. But Denise's phone buzzed at 3:15 p.m. with a text from Mrs. Callahan. "Ethan played at recess today." He smiled. Denise sat in her car in the school parking lot and pressed her phone against her chest and cried. 2 months after Flight 341, the airline published the summary of the independent investigation. It was covered by every major outlet. The numbers were staggering. 112 complaints, 89 dismissed. The public response was immediate and furious. 3 other airlines announced voluntary reviews of their own complaint processes within the week. 2 senators introduced a bill requiring all domestic carriers to implement independent oversight of discrimination complaints. The bill was called the Safe Skies for All Act. Rachel testified before a congressional subcommittee on a Wednesday in November. She wore a dark suit and spoke without notes for 14 minutes. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Ethan Brooks is 8 years old, she told the committee. He was traveling alone on a domestic flight. A flight attendant with a documented history of racial hostility grabbed him by the hair and spat on him. The airline had been warned about this employee at least 5 times. 2 of those warnings were deliberately concealed by an internal manager. This is not an isolated case. This is a system that was built to protect institutions and not passengers. I am asking this committee to change that system. The committee members asked questions for an hour. Rachel answered every one. When she finished, the ranking member, a 71-year-old senator from Georgia, looked at her over his glasses and said, "Ms. Monroe, in 30 years on this committee, I have rarely heard testimony this compelling. Thank you." Rachel nodded. She gathered her materials. She walked out of the hearing room and into the hallway and called Marcus. "How did it go?" he asked. "They listened." "Are they going to act?" "I think so. The bill has bipartisan support. It's not going to die in committee." "Rachel, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done." "You don't need to thank me. Ethan thanked me. He sent me a drawing last week, an airplane with a rainbow coming out of it." Marcus laughed. It was a real laugh, the first one Rachel had heard from him since this began. "He's been drawing a lot of rainbows lately," Marcus said. "Good. That's really good." 4 months after Flight 341, Marcus and Ethan were invited to speak at the National Youth Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. The invitation came from a coalition of civil rights organizations that had followed Ethan's case from the beginning. They wanted Marcus to give the keynote address, and they wanted Ethan to say a few words, if he was willing. Marcus said yes immediately. Then he called Ethan. "Buddy, some people in Washington want us to come talk. Big room, lots of people. They want to hear from you." "From me?" "Yeah, from you. You don't have to say much, just whatever you want to say." "What if I mess up?" "You won't mess up, and even if you did, that would be fine too." "Will Mama be there?" "Mama will be right in the front row." "Will Rachel be there?" "I'll make sure she is." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Marcus could hear him breathing. "Okay, Daddy, I'll do it." The summit was held on a Saturday in March. The auditorium held 800 people, and every seat was full. Community leaders, educators, parents, activists, journalists, students from high schools and colleges across the country. Gerald Patterson was there. He had driven up from Marietta with 6 members of his congregation. Dorothy Chen was there. She had flown in from Sacramento with her daughter. Javi Reyes was there. He had quit the airline 2 months earlier and enrolled in nursing school. He sat in the back row with his nephew Marco on his lap. Marcus spoke first. He walked to the podium in a dark suit and no notes and looked out at 800 faces. 6 months ago, I was a father waiting at an airport with a glitter sign. That's all I was. A dad, excited to see his kid. I didn't plan to be standing here. I didn't plan for any of this. But someone hurt my son. And when someone hurts your child, you have 2 choices. You can be angry or you can be effective. He paused. I chose effective. My son's mother chose effective. Our attorney, Rachel Monroe, chose effective. And because of those choices, an airline was forced to confront 20 years of failure. An investigation exposed a system designed to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. A bill is moving through Congress that will change how every airline in this country handles discrimination complaints. Training programs are being implemented that will reach tens of thousands of crew members nationwide. He looked at the front row. Denise was there. Rachel was beside her. But I'm not here to talk about policy. I'm here to talk about my son. 8 years old, quiet, kind. The kind of kid who says please and thank you and yes, ma'am, even when someone is hurting him. He was attacked because of what he looks like. He was attacked because he was alone and small and couldn't fight back. And he blamed himself. He asked me if he did something wrong. Marcus stopped. He pressed his lips together. He breathed. No child should ever have to ask that question. No child should ever believe that being hurt is their fault. And no child should ever have to be brave the way my son was brave on that airplane. Children shouldn't have to be brave. They should be safe. The room was silent. Then it wasn't. 800 people rose to their feet. Marcus waited for the applause to quiet. Then he turned to the side of the stage. "Ethan, come on up, buddy." Ethan walked out from behind the curtain. He was wearing a white shirt and a blue tie that Denise had bought him the day before. His shoes were polished. His hair was cut fresh. He looked smaller than anyone expected. He always did. He walked to the podium. Marcus adjusted the microphone down for him. Ethan gripped the sides of the podium and looked out at the room. 800 faces. 800 strangers. His hands were shaking. Denise leaned forward in her seat. Rachel put a hand on Denise's arm. Ethan opened his mouth, then he closed it. He looked down at the podium. He looked at his father, who was standing 3 feet away, steady and present. Marcus nodded. Ethan looked back at the room. "I was scared," he said. His voice was small. The microphone caught it and carried it to every corner. On the airplane, I was really scared. The lady grabbed my hair and I thought I did something bad. I thought it was my fault. He paused. He swallowed. My daddy told me it wasn't my fault. Rachel told me it wasn't my fault. My mama told me. My doctor told me. A lot of people told me, and I believe them now. His hands stopped shaking. Something in his posture shifted. Something that had been compressed for 6 months found space to expand. I'm not scared anymore. And if there's another kid out there who had something bad happen to them, I want to tell them the same thing everybody told me. It's not your fault, and it's okay to be scared, but you don't have to stay scared. The room erupted. 800 people on their feet, clapping, crying, shouting. Gerald Patterson was standing with tears streaming down his face, his hands above his head, applauding with everything he had. Dorothy Chen was clutching her daughter's arm, sobbing. Javi Reyes was holding his nephew tight against his chest, his face buried in the boy's hair. Denise was in the front row with both hands over her mouth and tears pouring over her fingers. Rachel had her arm around Denise's shoulders, and her own eyes were wet, and she was smiling.